It consists of what to do with the physical aspects of the body, and then the next one is what to do with the breathing, and the third one is the mental discipline or the mental exercises. So it's body, breathing, and mind, and I think we could probably cover it in about 3 basic classes. So we'll start that next week. Now, about the format, I'm here. That's I'm amazed at this technology. It's just like, I'm glad I don't have to do it. The format is, we're continuing basically the method that I learned from my teacher learned from his teacher, and it consists of getting together in a pure place like a monastery where people are holding the precepts, and with a combination of quieting, stilling the mind, and then looking into the teachings, generally through text, we try to develop our own inherent wisdom, our own capacity. We try to realize that own capacity. So it's a combination of mental stilling, contemplation, and then looking at the text, which in some ways are a passing down, if you will, almost in code of the essential teachings for awakening. Now the text we're looking at here, we've been looking at for, I guess, this is our second semester now, or third? Oh, we're into the second year already. Wow, okay. It's by a Chan Buddhist master called Han Shan. Anybody remember his dates, roughly? Ming dynasty, which for most Americans doesn't mean diddle. Okay.
To the middle of 19th century. I mean, Spain.
Oh, the Ming dynasty, but he didn't live from the 1500s to the 19th century. If he did, you'd all be really interested in his teaching, or more interested. Roughly, he's living at the time of Shakespeare, for those of you familiar. And of course, I say that today, and somebody's like, who's Shakespeare? I don't know. Anyhow, that's the time. And this text we're looking at is part of, he wrote extensively. He was considered one of the scholar monks, a combination of scholar and meditator practitioner. And so this one we're reading is called Wandering in a Dream. It's a section from Wandering in a Dream where he's answering a question posed by a scholar official of that time, asking him what is the essentials of this practice, of the spiritual practice, and he's giving a response, and that's what we're into now. So, excuse me? Oh, yeah. So that's nice he's asking, because it's quite noisy as this thing starts to descend. So when they project it on the screen, you're going to see kind of in media res. We're going to drop into the middle of things where we are. We're not going to go back and look at it from the beginning, except to say that his language is very straightforward, and our translation has tried to retain that in the English. So it's got a minimal of technical terms. It doesn't seem to be stilted by time, even though it's the Ming Dynasty. I think our translation, for example, in English is easier to read than Shakespeare. But how many of you read Shakespeare? A few hands, okay. So Shakespeare is not like, a contemporary novel, right? There's a kind of archaic quality to it, forsooth, right? So we're doing this with Han Shan not just because we want to make it accessible, because I think the original is this direct. So, we are at the yeah, you want to shoot ahead to Let's take a good look at body, mind, and world. And the way it works is usually on a Thursday night there's a subgroup here about 6, 7, 8 people whose Chinese is very good and some whose English is very good, and we get together as a group and we work on it. So what you see up there, for example, the way we do it is we put up the original Chinese characters, and then there, which you've probably not seen, is a romanization. So the romanization is the pronunciation of those characters. The next step we do is to put a literal translation, character by character, English word by English word, in a combination. And when you read it, you kind of get a feel for it, but it's really stiff. And then the next stage is to see if we can't polish that into a more fluent English version. And then usually we meet at the end of the semester for 2 or 3 days in a row with tea and cookies, and we go over and polish it one more time, adding some footnotes and things like that that we feel are essential. So this is kind of the format we've been using. We're translating this week to week. So we usually meet on Thursday night, Friday night's a class, and we'll pick up again next Thursday. So we have enough text to get us through tonight, and then we're going to have to cook up some more this Thursday again. So, Han Shan at this point is saying, when you begin this practice to awakening, to breaking through confusion and attachments, and to reunite with your own spiritual nature, to become enlightened or awakened, he says you have to address your mind and your habits, because the mind and the habits are, in a sense, the frozen awakening. They're the awakening in its dormant phase, or a phase that is not flowing. So the habits and one's own mind are almost as if a snarl of entanglements. And so the practice is to disentangle that mind, to disentangle consciousness, and return it to its innate purity and stillness, called Buddha. So he says, when you do this, you got to face your own mind directly. And you have to reverse the flow of the habits and the ways you've been going previously. You have to find this new, or rediscover this very old way of using your original mind. And he says this means a lot of things have to be shed. Previous ideas, understandings, and the ways you calculated before. So the method is, we always talk about this, is returning. So the path to awakening is not a journey outside in search of something, but a returning by entangling what is whole and complete already within. Okay, this is really important to understand, because it'll play into what tonight's text is. So then he says you need to take a good look at the body, the mind, and the world, and see them for what they are. They are all interrelated, interacting, coming from one's own mind and consciousness. And because they're passing, fleeting, ephemeral, in constant change, they're like illusions, mirages, images in a mirror, the moon's reflection in water. Okay, so now we come to the next section. So he says, as you look at the way that you've been constructing the world through the mind that's confused and through the mind that's attached, you then use a contemplation of what are called the sixth sense objects. In other words, sights, sounds, smells, taste, the tactile realm, and then the realm of mind, which are called dharmas or phenomena. These are what constitutes that reality. So the things we see, the things we listen to, the things we taste, and so forth, are filtered through our six sense organs of eyes, ears, but transmuted or changed or distorted or arranged or set up according to our consciousness. So we're not seeing things as they really are in the unawakened state, but we're seeing things rather through the filter of our fantasies, our fears, our emotions, our longings. You following me? So what we're actually perceiving is as if through a mirror darkly, to quote another phrase. We're seeing things through the lens of the ego and its grasping and confusion. So it's not like it's not there, but we're not seeing it clearly because it's distorted by this grasping, attaching mind. So therefore, he says, you have to then learn to see these things as sounds as the wind whispering through trees. Contemplate all we experience as floating clouds drifting through the sky. He's giving you a kind of contemplation to break the attachment that we think these things are absolute, real, permanent, fixed, and they belong to me. And he says, no, all things are like dreams, illusions, bubble, shadows. It doesn't mean dreams, illusions, bubble, shadows exist, okay? But they can't be got at. They can't be held permanently. This is just the mind's longing. So he says, if you see them drift, they are illusory, transitory things. Our own minds are just like this natural world. And all of our discursive thinking, emotional anxiety, the seeds of our cravings and lust and desires, the habituations, the habits, the stress, the worry, the inner impediments, and so on and so forth, all these are empty, vain, insubstantial. Now, he doesn't mean to say you don't feel this. Obviously, we feel it. And sometimes we feel it really intensely. We feel as if there's no way to break out of this. The stress, for example, just the stress itself, is so powerful that we feel completely lost, and sometimes to the point of despair. And yet he's saying these are in fact creations of our own mind, our own consciousness.
The location. Do you have a couple words from the text that are unique? He's on literally the wrong page.
Oh. You got to go ahead quite a ways, almost to the end of the text, because you're going to reach the end of the cliff pretty soon.
Can you just say a phrase here?
Dream.
A little bit more.
How about contemplate the sounds as wind whispering through the trees? That's a nice one. Whispering wind.
Whispering will come up once. Trees might come.
You don't have the text?
Not exactly.
You still don't have it. And I'm reading it to you so you're getting it, but the old-fashioned way. So everybody's looking at the screen, but I'm saying something else. I tell you, this technology is really powerful stuff. I know I've seen people on, some places there'll be just the screen and there's nothing on there. People just... There we go.
You can search tree.
There you got it. Great. It's in blue. So he's saying, just as in the natural world, clouds come and go, mists form and change, water turns into frost and ice, melts, and then vaporizes again. The seasons come and go, winter, fall, spring, the flowers fall and come back again. All of you looking at the whole world of nature, even the stars and the planets and the galaxies, are going through constant changes and transformation. There's no place you can put your hand on and say, it stays, it lasts. So again, the poets would say, nothing gold can stay. Nothing is permanent, right? You're familiar with this. So we know this about nature, okay? And we know this about the cosmos. And we see, they're trying to figure out, is the universe expanding or contracting? But it's not still. It's moving. Stars and planets and galaxies are coming into being. Some are fading and some are already gone. This is the nature. These are called the four marks. Coming into being, abiding, fading or disintegrating, and gone. And we see this from the macro out to the ends of the universe, which technically speaking probably doesn't have an end. I know this is hard to wrap the mind around. To the micro, to the very cells and genetic structures of the body, we see this constant change and transformation. Moreover, if we think about it more profoundly, we realize that micro and macro is constantly interacting. So the basic elements are constantly interacting from the furthest reaches to the depths of our being. This is the nature, the interpenetrating nature of reality, okay? So he's saying, just as nature's like that, you have to understand that all these states and feelings and emotions and attachments you have are similarly, so that's where he says, our own minds are just like this natural world, as by analogy. So too, these things are coming and going with us, and they're passing and fleeting. And where is there anything that's stable and unchanging? It's not there. Now, the next passage is, and now he's giving both instruction. This is meditation instruction, okay? In other words, while you're doing the sitting practice, this applies. As you're sitting and various thoughts and feelings and emotions and impulses rises, he's giving you a method to stabilize your mind by contemplating in this way. See them as dreams, illusions, bubble shadows. See them as a passing phenomena. Don't grab and attach and think, oh, this is really great, or get worried or afflicted. He says, just keep a level and even mind, equanimity. So he says, deeply contemplate in this way as soon as a thought arises. What kind of thought? Here, we want to interpret this going above. Anxiety, seeds of craving, desires, habituation, stress, inner impediments, and so on and so forth. These kinds is what's meant by here by thought. Now, this doesn't, why I'm pointing this out, it doesn't mean the functioning of the mind when it's unobstructed and it's able to think without attachment, reflectively. That's a different kind of thinking process. This is referring to what's called wangshan, or incorrect or wrong use of the thinking process. Okay? So when these thoughts arise, what do? You investigate where it's coming from. You take it back to its source. And it's coming from one's own mind. It's not from the outside. And he says, be really attentive. Absolutely do not allow even one of those thoughts to slip by unnoticed. Because if they slip by unnoticed, it's almost like a horse pulling a chariot. If that horse gets out, the chariot being your mind, your state of mind, your nature, gets pulled off and goes galloping away. Okay? So in a sense, what it's saying is, if we can hold the mind to this equanimity, if we can hold it steady and constant and observe these things as they come and go, we won't be led astray. We won't get all stressed out and all entangled and confused. But if we don't nail it and you're just casual about it, wow, it's gone. Midwestern expression, don't close the barn doors after the cattle are out. It's too late. So you have to be watching the gate of the mind. Nor let yourself be deceived or misled or beguiled. We haven't figured out what we want to use here. By it. So don't mistake it as something real, significant, telling. Okay? See it for what it is. Okay, next part. Wow, we're getting... So you contemplate the wind like whispering, the light like what, passing shadows? Is this in the music going to be next, or what? Did you lose the text? The mind is like a hard drive, by the way, the brain. I'll read it to you the old-fashioned way. Just sort of listen, and then if it comes up, fine. If it doesn't. He says, by applying your skill in this way. Now, he calls this a skill. This is like a technology, if you will. This is something you actually do. You don't just sort of sit there and zone out. Or just sort of like, wow, I'm meditating. This is a skill. This is kung fu in the Chinese sense. This is like a martial art in a sense. Or like a surgeon who's working on the human body. You're focused. You're concentrating. You're watching. I was watching a quadruple bypass surgery. They let me in and scrubbed down on the whole thing, and I was right there with the doctors elbow to elbow. to make you feel better. I wasn't doing anything but observing. It's like, oh, you want to try that? Sure. No, I was just observing. But the focus and the concentration that they brought to that task, especially when they're getting down to finding the key arteries to sew together. You know what bypass surgery is? Those of you with weak stomach, I'll keep it clean. So you open the whole chest cavity up, right? And there's just a big cavity there, and then they keep throwing ice in to keep it cool. I mean, like ice, just like you would at a barbecue. They're throwing it in. And the heart is there, and the various arteries are clogged. If they're clogged, one, there's a 1, 2, triple bypasses, quadruple bypass, and so forth. So what they do, just like if you had a hose that was clogged and you can't get the clog out, you cut that section of hose that was clogged and throw it out, and then you reconnect the two. So you have a new, and you have to suture that artery or vein back together again, and those parts come from the legs. So while there's the surgeon's doing this part up, there's 3 or 4 people at the top, myself, I'm 5, looking, and there's 2 down there cutting out the new parts from the legs, and they're handing it forward. Yeah, and you're like, a little section of artery, here it is, delivered. And then they go in, and the doctor, the head surgeon, has to sew those 2 parts together. Now, you have no idea how small this is. You're thinking, like angleworms or earthworms or noodles. We're talking about something like a little bigger than a thread. Oh, it's so small. And they're focused to find it. They're going like this. They're putting their scalpel in and saying, I don't think that's it. No, that's not it. Look it's way down. Yeah, that's it. And they tease out this new one, and then they find the old one, and they bring it over. And then this is why the surgeon gets massage all the time, because he's like this. Because he's always looking at this angle. This is 4 or 5 hours. And they have to sew that. So they got this magnifying piece on their eyes. What I'm getting at is the concentration is intense. I mean, they're in there, and if they sew it too tight, it'll close off. If they sew it too loose, it'll leak. Right, this is how, and they're sewing it with this tiny thread magnified. And they get it done. Of course, the heart is stopped. That was the first part, because they stopped the heart. You think they're dying. No, they got all machines going, so the blood and everything's going through these machines. So there's another crew over there reporting what's going on with the machines. Well, the heart is stopped. So the person's kept alive by the machine. Good thing it's not this machine. Okay, so they're kept alive by the machine, and when they're all done, they go, okay, start it up. Boom, they turn the machine off, boom, it comes up, and hopefully the heart starts going ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom. But then they have to watch. Oh, it's leaking. Shut it off, go back and do this. So I'm telling you, the focus and concentration, that's what he's saying, applying your skill. Applying your skill where? To your own mind, to your thoughts and emotions. Watch them, nail them, identify them. Don't let them slip out, because they'll take you down a path that you're very hard to recover from. So he's teaching the meditation technique in the very basics. Watch your mind. Your mind is the source of everything in your life. Your mind is the king. Your mind is a director of all the things of your life. If you can attend to that, you have control over your destiny. If not, you're just pulled along. Okay, so he says, this skill in this way. Now he says, if you do, you're approaching something true and genuine. Now, important line, there's nothing outside of this. So this teaching is called the mind dharma, or the dharma ground of Buddhism. It's the teaching that is passed along from enlightened master to enlightened master from the time of Shakyamuni Buddha. You're really into it. Sometimes it's called the dun, meaning the immediate or sudden or direct teaching. It's not provisional. It's not shaped by all kinds of expedients. It's pointing directly to this method, saying your mind is the source of everything. If you can get and understand and control and direct that mind, you're in charge and you have full awakening. This is Buddha. So the Buddha has this experience using the skill that he developed to do this. When he finally has the full awakening, what's called Anyuttara Samyak Sambodhi, he says, wow, strange indeed, All living beings have this potential. Every living being has this innate, inherent potential for awakening. And it's not greater or less than others. It's equally the same. Only because of two things do we not fully realize it. One he called wrong or misperception or wrong thinking, the wrong use of our mind. And the other he said grasping and attaching. And they're sort of related. Because we misperceive, we grasp and attach. Because we think we're not whole and complete, we start looking outside. And he says, thus begins the process of dukkha, of samsara, of dissatisfaction, of suffering, and so forth. So he's saying, on his awakening, he'd been going all over India, from teacher to teacher. He finally realized he had everything he needed whole and complete within his own mind and nature. Only he hadn't just sat, watched, and got to the point where not one thought was being led astray, and eventually no thoughts like that were even arising anymore. And that's called nirvana, and it's realizable within this life. It's not something that happens beyond. This is bodhi, awakening. And it's also called, he said, liberation. This is the ultimate freedom. So when he gets this state, all the teachings come down to this, and this is what Han Shan's talking to tonight. He says there's nothing outside of this. There's nothing outside of this process. So if you look at the next line, he says, do not dabble in the esoteric or seek shortcuts. These lead nowhere. Even to talk about this practice is more than I wish to do. What's subtlety here? He's saying even this practice, I don't want to talk about it really because it too is a little bit of an expedient. But we have to use it to get back to this. You follow where he's going? He's saying, well, but why do we have practice in it? If you say everything's whole and complete, we're lacking nothing. He said, yeah, I hate to talk about it that way because really you only need the practice if you're confused. If you're not confused, you don't need the practice. Buddhism only exists because of confusion. It has no reason to exist other than that. There's no confusion, there's no Buddhism. It's not like it's some absolute teaching on a rock someplace that it just exists. It only comes into purpose because of confusion and suffering. Once it's over, the teaching's over. This is the parable of the raft, you all know. So this particular line is really important. Now, if you want to say the elements, I'll get into here because we really worked on this esoteric, how we translate. What's the Chinese? Yeah, meaning literally mysterious stuff. Yeah. Magic. So we played around this and we had a good time, and you can get caught up in this. Believe me, if you got access to Google, you start going into this, it really gets rich. Basically, if you look at it in terms of the Buddha saying there's two things, the false thinking and the attaching, then esoteric could be translated as the false thinking is basically to think it's outside of me. The spiritual realization, the source of my happiness and peace, everything I want is somewhere outside. This is the wrong thought. Okay? This is the first basic wrong thought. I am insufficient. I am lacking. And I need to fill this hole by something outside. A relationship, a thing, a possession, a career. Whatever we reach out for, and this is the nature of attachment from the Sanskrit graha, grabbing, comes from the misperception that we're lacking. This is so fundamental. All the emotional anxiety comes from this. Once you have that misperception, then he says the next thing comes up, grasping and attaching. So from the misperception, then comes the grasping and attaching for something. These are the two things the Buddha lists as the main obstructions for our own awakening. So the esoteric in that sense is built upon a seeking outside one's own mind and nature for the way, for the path to liberation. And this in Chinese but might sometimes call Wai Dao, outside the way. Now, esoteric, it's also called, anybody want to go by the, now we go, let's free associate here. all the various forms of this that you are familiar with. You don't have to have practiced them yourself. You can say, I know somebody who did this. But what would they consist of if we started to go into this list?
Miraculous.
Okay, so the miracle phenomena. Okay, anything else? Various kinds of mysticism. Everybody know what mysticism is? Okay, that's okay, you don't. You just get an idea it's in this area. Ever hear of Hermeticism? Hermetics? That means you are able to influence the world through contacting heavenly sources. This is one of the natures of esotericism. Oh, spiritual powers. Generally, powers of any kind relating to spiritual practice is a form of esotericism. This leads to receiving messages from the spirits, seances. We're getting closer to home here. Mediums. Ever hear of channeling? Now, you know, he mentioned hallucinogens. Now, some people are saying, what are those? Well, tomorrow we're going to serve some at lunch here. And all of you can transcend. I'm laughing, but when I was in college, this was, in fact, an avenue to Bodhi. I have, said the teacher on the stage, a solution here that is colorless, odorless, and tasteless. It is the nectar of the gods and the Bodhi of the Buddhas. One drink and you will be awakened. Now, that teacher was Tim Leary, and the substance he had was lysergic acid diethylamide, LSD. Okay? So, hallucinogens, in other words, outside agents to get you to this. You see the thing here? Everything is about seeking outside. The medium, the channeling, is between the human and the divine. There is this bridge, this medium that you go through. And therefore you start seeking this. Anything else that comes to mind? Fortune telling of now. How many different kinds of fortune telling are there? Every society seems to have its own form. When I went to a Buddhist temple my first time in Asia, I was so happy I was not in a superstitious teaching. And then I saw people bowing down to the Buddhas and going, shaking some, like Las Vegas cups of dice. And what they were fortune sticks. And they'd shake it, and whichever one would hop out, influenced by the spirits, that would be the one they would read, and then they go to interpret and so on and so forth. So they were bringing dead ducks and money to the altars, seeking the aid of the spiritual realm to give them their wishes fulfilled. Believe me, getting your wishes fulfilled generally is another form of dukkha, but that's... Okay, so divination. Any other kinds you know about? Palm reading, tarot. Astrology. Now, astrology is interesting because there you have the idea that there's a relationship between you and the stars that determine and shape your behavior. So again, you got the outside influence again. So you just start thinking about this. All of these are what we would put under the title of the esoteric. A popular movement in the United States was theosophy, with someone called Madame Blavatsky, and that has morphed into a lot of New Age stuff now. So now we start getting into, a lot of stuff out there. Basically, what it consists of, if you buy, sell, believe, acquire, come to, take, or whatever this, for whatever price, because usually it's a price, you will get in return spiritual powers, liberation, enhanced sexual tantric powers, blah, 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 blah. Cleansing of your karma for only $250 with this. Okay, you know where I'm going? This it's proliferated. It's so abundant in our society and all societies that we don't even recognize it anymore. This, from what Han Shan is saying, is the confusion, thinking that outside of our own, the stilling and purification of our own mind, there's some liberation. Because one of the definitions my teacher gave of virtue is when you don't depend on anything outside. So when you're leaning on something, there's attachment, there's dependency. And when there's that, there can't be liberation. It's pretty simple. So, Alchemy was another one that was very popular. What was alchemy about? This isn't what you did in college, by the way. This is not chemistry. This is alchemy. A little different. Elixirs of immortality. So you take the base metals and you transmute them into gold and so forth. That was one. Many Chinese emperors died of this because one of the elixirs of immortality was a transmutation of mercury, which they would ingest straight. Now, before death comes madness. So a lot of social history you can look at as a result. Roman history had lead poisoning. But anyhow, so that's probably modern alchemy would be. Now, you don't know anybody around here who's mixing mercury and lead and whatnot and trying to get gold, right? There we go. There we go. So we don't call it alchemy, but this search for immortality through bio or genetic engineering, the latest I read about was this kind of really cool scientist in Japan who's doing it with these micro little jellyfish. And these jellyfish die, and then they come back to life again. And they die, and they come back to life again. And it doesn't seem to be any end. They're called the immortal jellyfish. So there's a lot. So, like people are really hot on that. Okay? Cryogenics. What's cryogenics? Another kind of alchemy. Anybody know cryogenics?
Freezing the body.
Freezing the body. And I give you the actual advertisement for this. If you can't afford the whole body, you can freeze your head. And then at some point, science will find a way to bring you back. Now, the guy, Tim Leary, turn on, tune in, drop out, had the thing. He was very much into cryogenics. But in the end, decided to be cremated, but then took part of his body and shot it out in a capsule to empty, to space. Paid to have NASA put it out there. So whatever awakening that was, I'm not sure. Okay, so what I did in this regard is I have two quotes. You can put up one now if you can find it.
Question about that? I don't know if it's appropriate to ask about it, but also we have the esoteric practice in Buddhism, like the quote-unquote esoteric school. I don't know if that's something that to explain because what's the principle for cultivating that?
It's a good question. He's asking about the Mizong, what's called the esoteric or secret school within Buddhism and what that's about. So we'll get back to that. This is a wonderful passage from Lao Tzu. I'm going to do my yoga here. He who has the least scrap of sense, forget the gender language, once she has got started on the great highway, Dao, has nothing to fear. So long as he or she avoids turning away from the great highway, which is one's own mind and nature. As long as you're on that, you're all set, okay? For the great highways are safe and easy, but people love bypass. Huh? And so what does he say here? Don't seek for shortcuts. They lead nowhere. So now you have Lao Tzu confirming this. This is the inner purification. Now I just want to put the other one up. This, by the way, just look at it. Do not copy it down and do not reference it outside of the screen tonight. Can you get that website? I just did a little search today and thought, well, what can I get here? Anything? Oh, here we go. So Ilona, could you read that in a loud voice if you can find the print?
Sacred mushroom ceremony is not only medicinal, but also a very powerful interdimensional journey for the body, mind, and spirit. The spirit of the mushroom can easily bring a participant to a state of no pity. I can't say the word.
No pity.
Which at the same time is a state of wonder and a deep connection to life. Such action is the first step in discovering a state of pure intuition and power over the elements of nature. You want me to go on?
Oh, this is, yeah. Come on, we're Berkeley. This is...
By experiencing profound feelings of another time and space, it is possible to cleanse past life karmic connections
With the mushroom, that's great.
as well as dislike, emotional tensions, routine circles, and insecurities caused by the personal history of karmic events. Since the mushroom induces a more clear and dynamic trance state in comparison to ayahuasca, it is extremely beneficial and magical to include a session of yoga, qigong, or any other spiritual discipline in the ceremony. The effect of this action can only be equaled to the feelings of the first Tao masters in China or the great rishis in India
Mm-hmm. Okay, enough. You got.
What's the ceremony?
See, what's the ceremony? So once again, tomorrow, it's incredibly persuasive. But this is very interesting. Why is it incredibly persuasive? Because it's easy. Now, if I said holding the precepts, not just with your body, but your mind, and cutting off thoughts of killing, stealing, lust, envy and jealousy and so forth, that's kind of like hard work. And then crossing your legs here. Now, some of you say, yeah, I've been sitting here like almost an hour. It's not too bad. Well, how many just did the chant session? How long did you sit, Wally? How long did you sit every day? Yeah, every day. How many hours? Till morning, till night, right? Till the moon came up. And you felt no pain or anything, right? Yeah. So those of you who practice meditation beyond the 45 minutes here realize, hey, this is hard work. So if you put the moral discipline plus the exercise, and then somebody says, psst, hey, buddy, you want to be a Buddha? Here it is, mushroom. That's very attractive, right? But what he's warning about here is that in itself is the mind that's off. The mind that thinks I can get something for nothing doesn't work. You know, Xuanzang, I told you this. You all know who Xuanzang is? He's the famous monk from China who went to India around 600, 625 Common Era because he wanted to get the original sources of Buddhism. All kinds of texts were coming into China and he couldn't figure out. They were so different. So he wanted to go and get original sources in Sanskrit and so forth from India. So he did this incredible journey. It's out in a book. It's called Journey to the West. And it's really remarkable because he kept journal notes along his way about what he encountered. And some of the best evidence we have about early Buddhism in China is from this record. In any event, he goes and he studies, learns Sanskrit there, gets so good he wins the debate in Sanskrit. They have an annual debate, sort of like the Super Bowl of spiritual. No, I'm serious. Like everybody in India came to watch this debate. And it was between him and I think a Jain master perhaps. And he won the debate. And so as a reward, the first thing he got was this humongous elephant. That was the first part of the prize, and then he got some other things too. But one of the things he encountered was a mushroom cult. Okay, probably Amanita muscaria as far as we know. And this was a cult where the mushroom was used as an hallucinogenic substance, and now they use a word in religious studies called entheogens, that transport you into the divine. Okay? So somebody said to him, wow, you got this ascetic practice and whatnot. Why don't you come on in, have some mushrooms, and you can get anuttara samyak sambodhi. And he was tempted. So don't feel bad. You thought it was like attractive. It was attractive. And then he remembered how his teacher said, there's no finding the way outside your own mind and nature. Anything you turn to outside will lead you down a wrong path. So he went, okay, can't do it. And he pulled away from that. But that's the document we have, how far back this type of activity goes. So it was attractive, but it would have been misleading because it would have led nowhere. We're out of time tonight. I'm going to stop here. I was going to tell a few stories from my own experience, but then I was going to share a really remarkable experience from one of the great masters, Xu Yun, who also encountered this. But I think I'll save it for next week. I don't want to go over. But it's worth dwelling on because this is extremely important. This teaching is so simple and so direct and basically says you have everything you need. But that mind that loves bypath is so powerful that even when you start sitting according to this method and you're going like this and the pain is really bad and all of a sudden there's no pain anymore and you go, I must be enlightened. Just that is that grabbing outside. You know? And it's like people will go and they'll think, when am I going to see the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas? When is sweet dew going to trickle from my head? When am I going to know others' thoughts? When will I get my past lives? You know, all of this is that mind that he's talking about. This is the esoteric seeking mind. So next week I want to spend a little more time with some actual examples from this, from the past, and I can share a couple of my own with you, embarrassing as they are. And you'll get a feel for how subtle the grasping, seeking mind is and how powerful this instruction tonight is about return the light, illumine within, seek the unnatural fullness of your own being. This is the line. Return the light, illumine within, seek the natural fullness of yourself, not your ego, but your intrinsic self. That's the whole of it. So we'll stop here for tonight. Next week we'll do a little meditation instruction, and I'll share with you some of these stories. Okay. I'm assuming there's no questions. All questions are seeking. No. Yes.
You know, there's a group in Berkeley, Open Circle, and they have many speakers, and they're neo-enlightenment. And their premise is that you don't have to have a practice. And it's like, it will come to you. I have a problem. I don't know how it just comes to you because I was with rather traditional spiritual practices. So I guess we don't know them. We don't know what I'm referring to.
No, and I'd be surprised if there's anything like that in Berkeley. I'm just joking. Berkeley is a Dharma realm unto itself. And some of the stories I'll tell you will go back to the 60s when I was here then. But Berkeley, like Boston and like India at the time of the Buddha, was a crossroads for all the spiritual currents of the time. So Nalanda University was not unlike Telegraph Avenue in many ways of UC Berkeley. Everything gathered there, and all these teachings were available. Competing spiritualities. Boston during the time of William James was this way too. So what I'm trying to do tonight is to give you a compass or a sort of a pole star, a discerning device to listen to, and then keep using that to look at whatever. Because in a sense, there's some principle to what you say. Han Shan and Shu Yun earlier say, and he said, remember this line? He said, basically, I don't want to talk about it if I have to. What he's saying is, our nature is so whole and complete and perfect in and of itself that if we just realized that, there'd be no need for any practice. So he is essentially saying practice is a kind of medicine we have to take because we're a little sick. If basically we didn't get sick, there'd be no need for medicine. So he says, I don't want to dwell on the medicine so much, but we do need to heal the illness. We do need some practice to correct. Once corrected, you can let go of the practice, but you cannot just sit around and wait unless you're a Buddha. Like the Buddhas are doing nothing. Like they're just sitting around. Well, why? Well, what would they be doing? There's nothing to do when you're not seeking. But if you're not awakened, it's like, and the Buddha uses this analogy, it's like you have an illness. And then you have to take the appropriate medicine to correct it, much like Ayurvedic medicine restores harmony and balance. Once you do that, then you stop taking the medicine, it's okay. But do not pretend that you're well, right? Because what takes over then is the habits. If you're just sitting around and not cultivating, those habits start to rule. So it's a very tricky thing. On the ultimate teaching, there is no practice, because all beings have the Buddha nature, all can become Buddhas. However, to disentangle the mind and to let go of, put down what's false, requires some discernment, requires some concentration, requires some looking into things. Eventually the goal is to be free of the practice or free of the medicine. So it's very helpful. I think it's like, for me, it's like waiting for lunch. I live alone. So I can sit there and say, waiting for lunch. Maybe I'm not waiting hard enough. Or I go in the kitchen and make something to eat. So Han Shan in an earlier part says, if you're hungry, eat some food. If you're cold, put on some clothes. If you're tired, take a nap. And if you're confused, practice. Somebody else isn't going to eat for you and make you full. Nobody else is going to put on clothes to make you warm. And you can't take a nap to make me feel rested. Well, nobody else is going to liberate you but yourself. So it's very pragmatic in that way. This is something you do. How much you do is how much confused you are. No confusion, nothing to do. I got a lot to do. But in a sense, it's a good busyness. This is constructive busyness as opposed to destructive busyness, which is the hyper-seeking outside. That, in fact, the more you seek, it doesn't bring any deliverance. So it's kind of frustrating. You think, I'm really busy. What are you accomplishing? In the end, says the sixth patriarch, it's bitter because you've used up all your energy seeking things that ultimately bring nothing. So, very good. Any announcements? Anything happening coming up? Louder?
February 7th? That's a while. It's next 2 weeks from now. Yeah.
What is that? Tell people.
Round table. We have a called Chan meditation roundtable, and basically, it's a gathering for people to come together, and we sit in the dining hall in the back, and we have a topic, and we kind of go around discussing the topic. So it's a chance for people to explore something more deeply as a group.
A little more informally.
A little bit more informally. So, it could be on esoteric dharma.
It could be if there's any esotericism in Berkeley. Yes? First Sunday of each month, there's a meditation practice. A walking meditation practice? Okay, right. We're doing sitting meditation practice, but there's also a walking meditation practice. 7:30 a.m. Lunch is provided. No mushrooms, sorry. Okay, anything else? If you have questions or whatnot, we can pick it up again next week.
Maybe also announce the mailing list.
And then would it be possible the Sunday, one-day sitting meditation class coming up? Or?
Good. We haven't had any kind of particular.
Maybe figure it out and then announce. If you want to get on the mailing list to know when the class is, or if it's going to be changed or whatnot, or even to get some of the material, I think, that we have here, except for that site on the mushrooms. I'm not going to share that with you. You? So contact Alan and give him your contact information.
If you want to get some update of the class, you can pass the email to me.
We're going to do a transference chant now in English, and basically it's a wish of expression to take the goodness of tonight's gathering and transfer it out to the larger world for whatever hope or cause that you feel is worth it.